It all started with a navy blue lunchbox and a courier who went to the 49th floor instead of the 19th. For 3 years, Robert thought he was throwing my heart in the trash every morning. He called my cooking suffocating and told me to hide my body in cardigans because my curves embarrassed him. He had no idea he was actually hand-delivering the blueprints of his own destruction to the only man who could ruin him. While Robert belittled my dreams over cheap takeout, Julian Vance, the man who owned half of Manhattan, was tasting my rosemary focaccia and reading the secret notes I'd hidden inside. Which is how I ended up here. I watched through the glass as Robert begged for a $15 million lifeline, his face flushed with desperation. He didn't realize that Julian wasn't looking at his pitch. He was looking at the navy blue tiffin sitting on the table between them. And he didn't realize that when I walked through those oak doors in a custom suit that traced every curve Robert told me to hide, I wasn't there as a wife. I was there as the partner about to buy his company for parts. If you've ever been treated like a placeholder, if you've ever been told you're nothing by the person who is supposed to love you, stay. Because I'm about to show you exactly how a misdelivered meal turned a year of secret letters into $1 million revenge Robert never saw coming. He never saw the ending coming. But then again, he never really saw me at all. It was a Tuesday morning when I realized I'd been making these lunches for 3 years. Every single morning. Waking up at 5:30 a.m. while Robert slept. Moving through our Manhattan kitchen in the dark. The sound of the gas stove igniting. The hiss of olive oil in a hot pan. The rhythmic thunk of my knife through fresh herbs. These sounds were the only things that felt like mine. That Tuesday, I made herb-roasted chicken on fresh-baked ciabatta. Arugula I shredded by hand. Heirloom tomatoes. $6.99 a pound from the farmer's market. Lemon vinaigrette I whisked until it was perfect. 90 minutes of work. I packed it in the navy blue lunchbox. $47 from Williams-Sonoma. 3 years old. And I tucked in a note. Cream cardstock. $22 for a set of 100. Hope your meeting goes well today. Thinking of you. Robert came into the kitchen at 7:02 a.m. Didn't say good morning. Just grabbed the lunchbox and left. I thought he was eating it. For 3 years, I thought he was eating it. March 18th. Our 3rd anniversary. I woke up at 5 a.m. Earlier than usual. I made Niçoise salad with seared ahi tuna. The tuna cost $34 a pound from the fish market in Chelsea. I cooked it rare. 90 seconds on each side, so the center stayed pink and perfect. Heirloom tomatoes. Haricots verts I blanched and shocked in ice water. Kalamata olives. A soft-boiled egg with a jammy yolk. Lemon anchovy vinaigrette. It was perfect. I added a note. Happy anniversary. I hope you know you're loved. Robert came into the kitchen while I was slicing tomatoes. He saw the lunchbox on the counter. His jaw tightened. I looked up from the cutting board. The morning light caught the edge of my hand, and I noticed the delicate curve of my wrist, the way my fingers moved with practiced grace. In the market yesterday, 3 different men had watched me select tomatoes. One had tried to start a conversation. Another had simply stared, like I was art in a museum he couldn't afford to touch. Robert had stopped looking at me like that years ago. I was the same woman he'd married. My body still carried the gentle curves that came from loving food, from tasting everything I made. Not thin like the women in his office probably were. Not sculpted by personal trainers. Just real. The kind of body that filled out a dress in a way that made strangers turn their heads on the subway. Everyone saw it except him. Robert gestured at the lunchbox like it was evidence of a crime. I put the knife down slowly. He said something about embarrassment. About Brad from the Lexington account. About how it made him look. Something cold crawled up my spine. I heard myself say the words, but they felt distant, like they were coming from underwater. Derek told me. At the Christmas party. You've been throwing them in the trash every morning for over a year. Silence. I waited for him to deny it. To explain. To apologize. He didn't. His face twisted into something ugly. Something I'd seen glimpses of before, but never this raw. He said I wasn't a real chef. That I was a girl from a diner town who took a few cooking classes. that I needed to stop trying to be something I'm not. Then his eyes raked over me in a way that made my skin crawl. He said maybe if I spent less time playing house and more time at the gym, he wouldn't be so embarrassed when his colleagues saw us together. The words landed like a physical blow. I stood there in my kitchen, in my soft cotton pajamas, my hands still smelling like lemon and thyme, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Because yesterday at the market, a man in a business suit had stopped mid-stride to watch me walk past. The fishmonger had smiled at me like I was sunshine. The produce vendor had given me an extra peach and told me I had a beautiful smile. But my husband looked at me like I was a burden. Like my body, this body that moved through the world collecting admiration like raindrops, was something shameful. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. And I realized I didn't recognize the man standing in my kitchen. Or maybe I did. Maybe this was who he always was. I said okay. Said I'd stop. He looked relieved. Left. I stood there for a long time, staring at the tuna. $34 a pound. I packed it anyway. Stop the video. Right now. Have you ever been looked at like you were invisible? Like the thing you worked on, the thing you cared about, was an inconvenience? Tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed? Or would you have left that morning? I stayed. And I need you to understand why. I kept making the lunches after that. Every single day. But something had changed. I wasn't making them for Robert anymore. I was making them for me. To prove I could still care about something. To prove I wasn't broken. March 18th, 7 a.m. The courier arrived exactly on time. I'd been using SwiftLink Express for 2 weeks. $23 per delivery. I paid for it out of the grocery budget by buying store-brand everything and skipping meals Robert wouldn't notice I wasn't eating. The courier's name was Marcus. New guy. I'd never seen him before. He smiled when I handed him the lunchbox. He logged it in his system and left. I didn't know it then, but Marcus had 2 deliveries in the same building that morning. 1, my lunchbox to Hartwell and Associates, 19th floor. 2, a contract addendum to Vance Capital, 49th floor. He mixed them up. At 12:17 p.m., Julian Vance opened my lunchbox. I didn't know this yet. Wouldn't know for 3 more days. But here's what happened. Julian had been in meetings since 6 a.m. London, Tokyo, Dubai, San Francisco. Back-to-back calls. Novadax. His assistant, Carolyn, had left a note on his desk about catered lunch. He hated those lunches. Every week, the same Michelin star catering company sent the same rotation of elevated dishes that tasted like expensive air. He told me later it was food made to impress, not to feed. So when he saw the navy blue lunchbox on his desk, unexpected, hand-delivered, no label, no explanation, he opened it. Inside, a glass container with Niquoise salad, ahi tuna, seared rare, sliced thin, heirloom tomatoes in 3 colors, haricot verts, perfectly green, a soft-boiled egg, halved, yolk golden and jammy, Kalamata olives, anchovy vinaigrette in a small jar with a handwritten label, house-made, extra lemon, and a note, cream cardstock. My handwriting. Happy anniversary. I hope you know you're loved. Julian told me later he read that note 4 times. He didn't eat the lunch right away. First, he called Carolyn to find out where it came from. Then he ate all of it at his desk, between emails. But here's the part one didn't know until much later. There was something else in that lunchbox. Something I didn't mean to put there. Folded under the note, stuck to the bottom of the container, was a receipt. From the fish market in Chelsea. Dated that morning. And at the bottom, in my handwriting, grocery budget, $84 left for the week. I'd been tracking expenses on the back of receipts because Robert monitored our joint account and got annoyed when I overspent. Julian saw it, and that changed everything. The lunchbox came back 3 days later. March 21st, 10:47 a.m. I was in the kitchen, staring at a pot of chicken stock I'd been simmering since 6 a.m. The apartment smelled like rosemary and garlic. Robert had already left for work. He didn't say goodbye. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anything. But when I opened the door, Marcus the courier was standing there, holding my lunchbox. He handed it to me and left. I brought it inside and put it on the counter. My hands were shaking. I opened it slowly, like it might explode. Inside, the containers were clean.
Washed. Dried.
And there was a note. Not my note. A different one. Expensive stationery. Heavy. Cream-colored. The handwriting was angular. Precise. Confident. I don't know who you are, but I tasted something in this meal I haven't tasted in years, Care. Thank you for that. Please don't stop. Underneath the note, 5 $20 bills. Folded neatly. $100. For a lunch. I stood in my kitchen for a long time just holding that note. I read it over and over. The words settled into my chest and then spread outward like wildfire. My heart wasn't just beating faster, it was a thrumming in my veins that made me lose my breath. There was heat blooming under my skin, starting in my chest and radiating down my arms, pooling low in my belly in a way that made me feel dizzy. This wasn't just appreciation. This was recognition. This was being seen in a way that made every nerve ending in my body wake up and pay attention. My fingers trembled as they traced the edges of the paper. Not from nervousness. From something primal. Something electric. Like my body understood before my mind did that this stranger's words were dangerous. Because they made me feel more alive in my own skin than Robert had made me feel in years.
Someone had eaten my food and felt something.
Someone had tasted the care. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt seen. I sat on the floor and cried. But these weren't sad tears. They were relief. They were recognition. They were the sound of something inside me that had been holding its breath finally exhaling. I didn't tell Robert. I should have. I know that. But something stopped me. This was mine. The only thing in 3 years that had been mine. And I didn't want him to take it away. I made another lunch. Not for Robert. For whoever had sent that note. Roasted vegetable tart with goat cheese and thyme. Heirloom tomato soup in a thermos. Focaccia bread, fresh baked, still warm. A small jar of honey butter. And a note. I'm glad it helped. That's all I ever wanted. I sent it through SwiftLink again. Same account. Same process. Except this time, I wrote a note to Marcus asking him to make sure this went to whoever received the last one. Not Hartwell and Associates. He nodded. The lunchbox came back the next day. Another note. It did more than help. It reminded me that care still exists. What's your name? My pulse quickened reading those words. The thrumming started again. That electric current beneath my skin that made me hyper-aware of my own body. I didn't answer the name question. Not yet. But I sent another lunch. And another. And another. For 3 weeks, we did this. Back and forth. No names. Just food and notes. His notes were thoughtful. Specific. He'd comment on the flavors. The lemon in the vinaigrette was perfect. Just enough acid to cut the richness. Or the technique. How did you get the focaccia crust so crispy? My notes were quieter. More careful. I blanched the dough in steam before baking. It's a trick I learned in culinary school. Culinary school? Are you a chef? I was going to be. Then I got married. There was a long pause after that one. 2 days. Then, did you stop because you wanted to? Or because someone convinced you to? I stared at that note for an hour before I answered. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. Because this stranger, this person I'd never met, was asking me the one question I'd been too afraid to ask myself. Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. Do you miss it? Every single day. His note started getting longer. More personal. I eat alone every night. In an apartment with 14 rooms. I can't remember the last time a meal felt like someone made it for me. Not for the idea of me. What's the difference?
You. This.
The fact that I can taste the care you put into this. Most people cook to impress. You cook to feed. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I just sent another lunch. Each time I opened the lunchbox and found his note, my body would respond before my mind could catch up. The thrumming in my veins. The flush creeping up my neck. the warmth spreading through my chest and settling low in my stomach. It was desire, I realized, not the performative kind, not the kind where you close your eyes and imagine someone else, but real, electric, undeniable desire for someone who saw you completely through nothing but food and words. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. A stranger just sent me $100 and asked me to keep cooking. Is this romantic? Or is this dangerous? Type romantic or dangerous in the comments. Because I didn't know either. But I couldn't stop. Week 7. The note that changed everything. Have you ever thought about doing this professionally? Not a restaurant. Something smaller. Delivery-based. I think you could build something real. I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back, I don't have money to start something like that. His response came the next day. What if someone invested? Not as charity. As a partnership. I think you could do something people need.
I almost didn't respond.
It felt too big. Too impossible. But I wrote back anyway. Why would you do that?
You don't even know me.
His reply, I know your food. I know how you write about it. That's more than most investors have. And then, at the bottom, and I know what it's like to be invisible in your own life. I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Again. But this time, it felt different. Like something inside me that had been holding its breath for 3 years finally exhaled. But then reality set in. Because while this stranger was offering me a future, I was still married to a man who was destroying my present. I started paying attention to Robert in a different way. He would leave for work at 7:15 a.m. His office was a 12-minute walk from our apartment. But some mornings, I'd check our shared location on Find My Friends. He wouldn't arrive at Hartwell and Associates until 8:30 a.m. An hour and 15 minutes unaccounted for. I told myself it was coffee meetings, client breakfasts, normal work things. But then I found the receipt. April 3rd. I was looking for our insurance card in Robert's briefcase. He'd left it at home. Asked me to scan something and email it to him. That's when I saw it. A receipt from the Benjamin Hotel. March 18th. Our anniversary.
7:47 a.m.
Continental breakfast for 2. $32. I was at home that morning, making the ahi tuna salad he called embarrassing. So, who was the second person?
I didn't ask him about it.
Not yet. Instead, I started looking. Credit card statements Robert thought I didn't check. Bouquet florist. $240. February 14th. I never got flowers. The Benjamin Hotel. Multiple charges. Always between 7 o'clock and 9 a.m. Bergdorf Goodman. Women's section.
A loro piana scarf.
$850. I don't own anything from Loro Piana. And then there were the text messages. Robert kept his phone face down. Always. On every surface. Dinner table. Nightstand. Kitchen counter. One morning, while he was in the shower, it lit up. Can't wait for Friday. From V. Cole. I didn't recognize the name, but I took a photo of it with my phone. Just in case. Robert wasn't just throwing away my lunches. He was throwing away our marriage. And he was using the lunchbox, the morning routine, the perfect wife at home making him breakfast as cover. While I was cooking, he was meeting someone else. While I was trying to save us, he was planning his exit. The lunches weren't the problem. They were the alibi. That night, Robert came home late, smelling like someone else's perfume. He moved through the apartment like I wasn't there. Showered. Got into bed. And when he reached for me in that automatic, entitled way he always did, something in me recoiled. His hands on my skin felt wrong. Cold. Like duty. I closed my eyes. But this time, I didn't see him. I saw words on cream-colored stationery. I saw care, handwritten and deliberate. I felt the weight of being seen by someone I'd never met, someone who tasted my soul in lemon vinaigrette and understood loneliness. I imagined what it would feel like if those hands belonged to someone who saw me, really saw me, who looked at my body not as something to be covered or hidden, but as something worth cherishing. My body responded to the thought in a way it hadn't responded to Robert in months, maybe years. There was a thrumming beneath my skin. An ache that had nothing to do with the man touching me. A pull so magnetic it made my breath hitch. And when it was over, when Robert moved away without a word, leaving me cold and untouched in spirit, I lay there in the dark. My heart was still racing. My skin was still humming with the ghost of what I'd imagined instead of what had actually happened. I focused on the sensation of being desired, not by Robert, but by the idea of the stranger. By someone who would taste my food and understand what it meant. Who would read my words and feel the loneliness underneath them. It washed over me like a physical wave.
Warm.
Electric. Real in a way Robert's touch hadn't been real in years. There were two voices in my head that night. One screamed, "You're wrong. You're a traitor. This is infidelity even if you haven't touched him. You're imagining another man while your husband lies beside you. You're a cheater." The other voice, louder now, radiant and certain, said, "But you deserve this. You deserve to be seen.
To be valued.
To feel true intimacy with someone who actually recognizes your soul through rosemary and thyme. Robert stopped seeing you years ago. How can you betray someone who treats you like you're invisible?" I didn't know which voice was right, but I knew which one made me feel alive. And I knew which one I wanted to believe. I was a traitor to my vows, yes. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't a traitor to myself. December 19th, Hartwell and Associates' annual holiday party. I didn't want to go. Robert insisted. I wore a black dress. Simple. Fitted. $89 from Nordstrom Rack. The fabric clung to my waist, skimmed over my hips in a way that was elegant, not provocative. When I tried it on at home, I'd caught my reflection in the full-length mirror and paused. The woman staring back at me was striking. Not magazine perfect. Something warmer. More real. The kind of beauty that deepens with attention, with care, with being seen. Robert had glanced at me when I came out of the bedroom. His eyes had narrowed. He'd said I should probably grab a cardigan. That the dress was a bit much for a work event. A bit much. Like my body was something that needed to be covered.
Hidden.
Apologized for. I grabbed the cardigan. Wore it all night, even though the restaurant was warm. At the party, I noticed other men noticing me anyway. A partner from another firm held my gaze a moment too long when we shook hands. A waiter smiled when he brought me wine. Small moments. Meaningless, maybe. But they landed differently now. Because at home, I was invisible. Everywhere else I was seen. The party was at a restaurant in Tribeca. The kind with no prices on the menu and a sommelier who describes wine like poetry. Robert introduced me to his colleagues. Every single time, he said the same thing about me taking a break from work. Not about being a chef. Not about being talented.
Just taking a break.
Like I was resting. Like I had nothing to contribute. I smiled. Shook hands. Made small talk. And then I met Derek. Derek was a junior analyst. Mid-20s. Drinking too much. He had that loud, friendly energy drunk people get when they think they're being charming. He saw me near the bar and grinned. We talked. He mentioned the lunches. Said everyone at the office talked about them. Something cold crawled up my spine. Then he said it.
The trash.
Break room. Every day. The room tilted. Derek kept talking, but I couldn't hear him anymore. His mouth was moving, but all I could hear was the word trash echoing in my head. Trash. 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 I found the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and stared at the tile grout for 20 minutes. There was a crack in the grout.
Small.
Shaped like a lightning bolt. I focused on it. Because if I didn't focus on it, I was going to scream. 3 years. 3 years of waking up at 5:30 a.m. 3 years of spending money we didn't have on ingredients Robert said were too expensive. 3 years of notes he never read. 3 years of love he threw in the trash. When I came out, Robert was looking for me. We left. We didn't speak. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and took 2 Tylenol PM. Robert didn't ask if I was okay. He never did. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in 1,000 tiny moments. And you ignore every single one because acknowledging it would mean admitting your life is a lie.
Tell me.
If you found out someone was throwing away something you made with love every single day, would you leave that night? Or would you stay and plan something they'd never forget? Type leave or plan in the comments. I'll wait. I didn't confront Robert after the Christmas party.
I know.
You're angry at me. I'm angry at me too. But here's what I realized sitting in that bathroom stall. Confrontation would give him power. If I cried, if I yelled, if I asked him why, it would center him. It would make him the focus. And I was so tired of him being the focus. So I did something else. I said yes to the stranger. We still hadn't met. I know that sounds strange, but it felt safer this way. Like if we stayed in the notes, it couldn't be ruined. He set everything up remotely, through his assistant, Carolyn, and a lawyer I never met. An LLC was formed.
Ember Salt Provisions.
A bank account was opened in my name. 3 months' rent for a commissary kitchen in Long Island City was wired in. $5,400. And I received a contract. Partnership agreement. 60-40 split. I kept creative control. He handled logistics and capital. There was a clause at the bottom about repayment of initial investment commencing once the business reaches profitability. No interest.
No timeline.
I read that clause 17 times.
No one had ever trusted me like that.
I signed it on a Tuesday. Didn't tell Robert. He thought I'd started taking a pottery class. He barely looked up from his phone when I told him. January 14th. 3 weeks after the Christmas party. Robert left his briefcase at home. Called me at 9:15 a.m., annoyed. Needed it for a client presentation. I looked at the briefcase sitting by the front door. I told him I couldn't. That I had plans. I didn't have plans. But I was tired of being his assistant. I hung up.
He didn't call back.
But an hour later, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the briefcase. Inside, I found what I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. A folder. Unmarked. Tucked into the side pocket. Inside the folder, bank statements. Not our joint account. A different one. One I'd never seen. Chase private client. Account holder Robert Russo. Balance $287,340. Transactions going back 2 years. Deposits. Withdrawals. The Benjamin Hotel. Monthly. Tiffany and Company.
$6,000.
Bergdorf Goodman. Multiple charges. And then at the bottom of the folder, I found it. A lease agreement. For a studio apartment in Chelsea. 600 square feet. $2,800 a month. Signed by Robert Russo and Vanessa Cole. Joint tenants. Move-in date, October 1st. 4 months ago. My husband wasn't just having an affair. He was building a second life. And he was funding it with money I didn't know existed. I sat on the floor of our apartment, holding that lease agreement, and something inside me finally broke. Not in a sad way. In a clean way. Like a bone that had been healing wrong for years and finally snapped back into place. I didn't cry. I took photos of everything. Every bank statement. Every receipt. The lease agreement. Uploaded them to a Google Drive folder only I could access. Put everything back exactly the way I found it. And then I sent a note to the stranger. I need to tell you something. My husband is having an affair. He has a secret apartment and almost $300,000 I didn't know about. And I just realized I don't care. Because for the first time in years, I'm building something that's mine. Thank you for seeing me when he couldn't. The lunchbox came back the next day. His note was longer than usual. I'm sorry you're going through this. But I'm not sorry it led you here. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to build something that matters. And for what it's worth, the person he's throwing away is someone I'd consider myself lucky to know. Even just through food and letters. I read that note 17 times. And then I told him my name.
Elena. His response came the next day.
Signed for the first time.
Brilliant.
Reading his name in his handwriting felt dangerously intimate. Like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. But I didn't want to uncross it. I wanted to run toward it. Stop right there. I need to ask you something. Do you think Robert is just arrogant? Or is he hiding a mistress? Because right now we have a secret apartment, a secret bank account with almost $300,000, and a woman named Vanessa Cole. Type secret if you think there's more to his story. Her name was Vanessa Cole, and I should have known about her from the beginning. April 12th, month 2 of Ember and Salt. I was at a Hartwell Company event. Another one. Robert had insisted I come. The event was at some rooftop bar in Midtown. Robert left me at the bar within 5 minutes. So I ordered wine and stood there, watching my husband work the room like I didn't exist. And then I saw her. Vanessa Cole. She was tall.
Blonde.
The kind of beautiful that doesn't need effort. She wore a cream silk blouse and high-waisted black pants.
Loro piana.
I recognized the fabric now. She laughed at something Robert said. Touched his arm. He leaned in. They looked like a couple. Derek appeared next to me at the bar, already drunk. Said I hadn't met Vanessa yet. That she and Robert were basically attached at the hip. That she was the one who actually closed all his deals. I smiled. Polite. Empty. Derek leaned in. Said he'd thought she was Robert's wife for 6 months. There it was. The truth everyone knew except me. I started paying attention after that. Vanessa was at every event, every client dinner, every late night at the office. Robert never mentioned her. Not once. When I asked casually over dinner one night, he barely looked up. Said she was a colleague. Asked why. That was it. End of conversation. But I started noticing other things. Robert's phone. Face down always. Charges on our credit card. Text notifications. And I remembered the lease agreement. The studio apartment in Chelsea. Signed by Robert Rousseau and Vanessa Cole. Joint tenants. I didn't confront him. What was the point? I was already building an exit. But Vanessa became a reminder. A reminder that Robert had checked out of our marriage long before I did. And honestly, it made it easier. It made the voice in my head that called me a cheater quieter. Because how could I betray someone who'd already left? The guilt that had been eating at me. The voice that screamed I was wrong for closing my eyes and imagining Julian's hands instead of Robert's. It started to fade. Robert had a whole second life. An apartment. A woman. A future he was building without me. And I had notes from a man who saw my soul in focaccia bread. We were both cheaters, I realized. The only difference was Robert was doing it with his body. I was doing it with my heart. The commissary kitchen was in an industrial building near the waterfront. Gray concrete. Flickering fluorescent lights. The kind of place where people went to work, not to dream. I loved it. My station was in the back corner. A 6-burner stove, a prep table, a small reach-in cooler I shared with a guy making Jamaican patties. I'd arrive at 9:45 a.m. after Robert left for work. I'd prep ingredients I'd already purchased and prepped at home in secret. At 4:30 a.m., before he woke up, I'd store them in cooler bags in the building's basement utility closet, behind the Christmas decorations no one ever used. Then I'd transport everything to Long Island City on the subway. 2 trains. 47 minutes. Carrying 30 pounds of vegetables and proteins in a rolling cooler bag. And I'd cook. The first week, I made 3 menu options. The Ember Bowl. Roasted chicken thighs with harissa, couscous, roasted vegetables, tahini drizzle. The salt and pepper steak. Seared flank steak, chimichurri, roasted fingerling potatoes, charred broccolini. The harvest plate, vegetarian. Roasted root vegetables, farro, kale, lemon herb vinaigrette, candied walnuts. Each meal, $18, including delivery. I built the website myself using Squarespace. $16 a month. The photos were taken on my iPhone on a foldable lightbox I bought on Amazon for $43. The copy was something Julian helped me write over our notes. We launched on a Wednesday. I thought maybe we'd get 5 orders. We got 47. By month 3, we were doing 80 orders a week. By month 6, 200. I hired 2 prep cooks. Both culinary students who needed portfolio work and rent money. I paid them $22 an hour in cash. Revenue started climbing. $50,000 a month. then 80,000, then 120. I kept every dollar in the separate bank account. The one Robert didn't know about. Julian and I were still just notes, but they'd gotten more personal. His notes taught me business, told me to raise prices, to trust my worth. My notes became confessions about feeling like myself for the first time in 4 years. His response to that one lived in my chest for days, a radiant warmth I carried everywhere. There was one note I kept, still have it actually, in my wallet. Folded small, creased soft from being opened and closed 100 times. You're not invisible, Elena. You never were. Some people just refuse to see what's right in front of them. That was the note that changed everything, because it made me realize I wasn't waiting for Robert to see me anymore. I was building a life where I didn't need him to. The letters became more frequent, more personal. Julian told me about Catherine, about failing at being present, about eating alone in a 14-room apartment. I told him about Robert, about being told to cover up, about 3 years of trash. And somewhere in those notes, something shifted. It wasn't just business advice anymore. It was understanding, recognition, the kind of intimacy that happens when two people who've been invisible finally see each other. Every time I opened a lunchbox and found his handwriting, my pulse would quicken. Not just a faster heartbeat, a thrumming in my veins that started in my chest and spread outward until my fingertips tingled. I'd read his words slowly, savoring them like food. And my body would respond in ways I couldn't control. A flush creeping up my neck, warmth blooming low in my belly, an ache that felt both painful and necessary. It was desire, I realized. Not the performative kind. Not the kind where you close your eyes and imagine someone else. But real, electric, undeniable desire for someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. Julian's words made me feel more alive in my own skin than Robert's touch ever had. And that terrified me, because I still hadn't met him, and I was already falling. The war in my head got louder. Every night, when Robert reached for me, I would close my eyes and imagine Julian. Not his face. I didn't know his face. But his words, his care, the way he saw me through rosemary and thyme. And my body would respond to that vision with an intensity that made me feel like I was betraying everything I'd ever believed about myself. One voice screamed, "You're wrong. You're having an emotional affair. You're a cheater. You're no better than Robert." The other voice, louder now, more insistent, "But you deserve this. You deserve to be seen. Robert has Vanessa. He has a whole second life. How can you betray someone who's already left?" The voices battled every single night. And every single night, the second voice won. Because the truth was, I didn't feel guilty about Julian. I felt guilty that I didn't feel guilty. I felt guilty that when Robert touched me, all I could think about was words on cream-colored stationery. I felt guilty that I was more intimate with a stranger through food and letters than I'd been with my husband in years. But mostly, I felt alive. And I hadn't felt alive in so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like. July 23rd, month 5 of Ember and Salt. I was at the commissary kitchen.
11:15 a.m.
In the middle of plating 42 orders of the Ember bowl.
My phone rang.
Robert. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was sharp, suspicious, asking where I was. I said pottery class. He said he was at the apartment, that my car was gone. My heart stopped. I didn't have a car. We didn't own a car. We lived in Manhattan. But I told him I was taking the subway to a pottery studio in Brooklyn. I said I took an Uber quickly, that the studio was in Williamsburg, that the subway took forever. Silence. He was thinking, calculating. He asked for the name of the studio. My mind went blank. I said Clay House, on Bedford Avenue. More silence. He said he'd call me back. He hung up. I stood there, phone in my hand, surrounded by 42 meals that were getting cold. Robert was checking. He was actually checking. I pulled up Google Maps, searched for pottery studios. There was one. Clay Space Brooklyn. Not Clay House. Close enough. I screenshot everything. 2 minutes later, Robert called back. He said there was no Clay house on Bedford. I corrected myself. Said Clay space. That I always got the name wrong. He asked when my class ended. I said 1:30. He said he'd pick me up. That he wanted to. My stomach dropped. He hung up. I had 2 hours and 15 minutes to get from Long Island City to Williamsburg. Finish 42 meals. Get them packed and send out for delivery. And show up at a pottery studio I'd never been to, looking like I'd just spent 3 hours throwing clay. I called my prep cooks. Told them I had an emergency. They had to finish plating everything. They didn't ask questions. Just moved. I called Clay Space Brooklyn. Said something about needing to drop in for a walk-in class right now. That it was an emergency. The woman on the phone sounded confused, but eventually agreed when I offered to pay double. I grabbed my bag. Ran to the subway. 2 trains. 38 minutes. Showed up at Clay Space at 1:04 p.m. The instructor, a woman in her 50s with clay-covered hands, looked at me like I was insane. I explained I needed to look like I'd been there for 3 hours. She laughed. Asked if my husband was checking up on me. I nodded. She sighed.
Said men.
Then helped me. She smudged clay on my hands. On my jeans. A little on my cheek. At 1:29 p.m., Robert pulled up outside. I walked out, waving. Smiling. Like everything was normal. He looked at me. At the clay on my hands. Asked how class was. I said good. Relaxing. He didn't say anything. Just drove. But I could feel it. He was watching me now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Robert, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how close I'd come. If he'd shown up 30 minutes earlier. If Clay Space had said no. If the instructor hadn't helped me. He would have found out. And everything I'd built would have been gone. The business. The exit plan. The future I was clawing my way toward. The notes from a man who saw me when my own husband couldn't. I needed to be more careful. Or I needed to move faster. But that night, lying there in the dark, Robert's breathing heavy beside me, I thought about Julian's handwriting. About the way he described food. About the fact that someone 42 floors above the city was building something with me, for me because he believed I mattered. My pulse quickened in the darkness. Not from fear. From anticipation. From the electric pull of knowing that somewhere in Manhattan, there was a man who understood what it meant to be invisible. And who was helping me become unforgettable. The thrumming in my veins started again. That magnetic ache. The sensation of being alive in my own skin. And the voice in my head that called me wrong got quieter. Because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't wrong. Maybe I was finally right. August 10th, month 6. Julian and I had been exchanging notes for almost 5 months. But we'd never spoken. Never met. Just food and letters. That day, his note was different. I need to tell you something. And I'm not sure how you'll feel about it. I opened the lunchbox, hands shaking. There was more. I've known who you were since week 2. Carolyn traced the SwiftLink account. Found your name. Your address. And when I saw your address, I realized something. You live in the same building as Robert Rousseau. Hartwell and Associates. I know him. Or I know of him. He's been trying to get a meeting with Vance Capital for 2 years. My blood went cold. I didn't say anything because I wanted this to be about you. Not him. But you deserve to know. I've been watching that building. Not you, specifically. But I've seen him. I've seen the way he leaves in the morning. Confident. Self-important. And I've wondered, is this the person who doesn't see you? There was more. 3 weeks ago, I approved a meeting request from Hartwell and Associates. They want a $15 million investment. I'm considering it. Not because they deserve it, but because I wanted to see what kind of man throws away something like you. I read the note 5 times. Julian had been watching. He knew. He'd known from the beginning. And he'd approved Robert's meeting. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't fate. This was calculated. I should have been angry. I should have felt manipulated. But all I felt was relief. Because someone finally was on my side. I wrote back that night. How long have you been planning this?
His response came the next day. I wasn't planning anything. I just wanted to meet the man who could have you and not see you.
And I wanted to know if you'd let me help you become unforgettable.
I sat with that for a long time.
Then I wrote back, what does unforgettable look like? His reply was one line. It looks like him realizing exactly what he lost. In a room where he can't ignore you anymore. My hands trembled holding that note. My heart wasn't just beating, it was a drum, violent and insistent, pounding against my ribs, so hard I could feel it in my throat. There was heat spreading through my chest, spilling down my arms, pooling low in my stomach in a way that made my legs feel weak. This stranger knew me,
Saw me.
was building something deliberately designed to make me visible. And the desire I felt reading those words was so physical it scared me.
It wasn't romantic.
It wasn't soft. It was primal, magnetic, the kind of pull that makes you rearrange your entire life just to get closer to the source.
I wanted to walk into that room.
Wanted to watch Robert's face when he realized. Wanted to stand next to Julian Vance and be seen as what I actually was. Not a wife who made lunches that ended up in the trash, but a woman who built empires from scratch while her husband slept. A woman who was worth investing in, worth seeing, worth choosing. That night, Robert reached for me again in that automatic way. And this time, I didn't just close my eyes and imagine. I let myself feel the full weight of my desire for someone else. Robert's hands on my skin felt like sandpaper.
Cold. Perfunctory.
Like checking off a box on a to-do list. But in my mind, I imagined Julian's hands. Hands that wrote notes about care. Hands that would touch me like I was something precious instead of something entitled. My body responded to that vision with an intensity that shocked me. The flush. The electric current beneath my skin. The ache so deep it felt like hunger. When Robert moved away, leaving me cold and untouched in spirit, I focused on the sensation of being desired by Julian's words. I let it wash over me like a physical wave, warm, enveloping, real in a way Robert's touch had never been.
There were two voices in my head.
One screamed, "You're wrong. You're imagining another man while your husband lies beside you. This is emotional infidelity. You're a cheater. A traitor. You're destroying your marriage." The other voice, stronger now, radiant and certain, roared back, "What marriage? The one where he throws your love in the trash? Where he tells you to cover up because your body embarrasses him? Where he builds a secret life with another woman while you cook breakfast at 5 a.m.? That marriage is already destroyed. You're not the one who destroyed it." And then, quieter, more powerful, "You deserve to be loved like this. You deserve someone who sees your soul in lemon vinaigrette. You deserve to feel alive in your own skin. You deserve intimacy that doesn't feel like duty."
I was a traitor to my vows, yes.
But for the first time in my life, I wasn't a traitor to myself. And that felt like victory. Hold on. Julian just admitted he's been watching Robert. He approved the meeting on purpose. He's been orchestrating this from the beginning. Is this romantic or calculated? Let's argue in the comments. Type romantic or calculated. Because I still don't know the answer. November 14th, Robert came home at 6:30 p.m. Earlier than usual. He poured himself a scotch. The expensive bottle, the one he saved for good news. Said, "We got the meeting." I looked up from my laptop. I'd been reviewing next week's menu. I asked what meeting. Vance Capital. He said the name like it was holy. Julian Vance was considering a $15 million investment in Hartwell. It could save the entire firm. My hands froze on the keyboard. I asked when. December 3rd.
10 a.m.
He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Said this was the biggest meeting of his career. That everything depended on this. I closed my laptop slowly.
Said I was sure it would go well.
He didn't hear the edge in my voice. He was already on his phone, texting someone. Probably Vanessa. I sent Julian a note the next day. My hands shook while I wrote it. "Robert has a meeting with you. December 3rd. Hartwell and Associates. He's my husband." The lunchbox came back faster than ever.
His note said 2 words.
"I know."
I stared at those words for a long time. How long have you known? Since week 2. Carolyn traced the address. My heart was pounding. Why didn't you say anything? Because this was never about him. It was about you. There was more. What happens now is your choice, Elena. I can cancel the meeting. I can take it and reject him quietly.
Or.
He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I thought about it for 3 days. 72 hours of barely sleeping. Robert didn't notice. He was too busy prepping his pitch. On the 3rd day, I sent my answer. I don't want you to cancel. I don't want you to reject him quietly. I want to be in that room. I want him to see exactly what he lost. And I want to be the one who walks away. Julian's response was one line. Then let's make sure you're unforgettable. December 2nd, the day before the meeting. I woke up at 4 a.m., but I didn't cook. Instead, I went to a tailor in the garment district. I'd found her through a recommendation from Carolyn. Julian's assistant had started helping me with things, quietly, without my asking. The tailor's name was Margot. 60-something. French accent. Pins in her mouth. She'd made me a suit.
Custom.
Charcoal gray wool. Italian fabric. The kind of thing that costs $1,400 but looks like $5,000. When I put it on, I didn't recognize myself. The charcoal wool moved with me, tracing the line of my hips and the curve of my waist that Robert hadn't touched with genuine hunger in years. The cut was precise, tailored to fit a body that loved food, that carried softness and strength in equal measure. In the 3-way mirror, I finally saw the woman the men at the market saw, the woman who made strangers stop and stare. I wasn't just fit or curvy. I was a masterpiece of soft edges and hidden power. Every curve was deliberate. Every line was intentional. My body wasn't apologizing for existing. It was claiming space. I realized then that my body wasn't a burden to be hidden. It wasn't something to cover with cardigans or apologize for at work events. It was a weapon Robert was too blind to fear. And tomorrow, he was going to see exactly what he'd been too stupid to appreciate. Margot smiled and said I looked like a woman who'd already won. That night, I made one final lunchbox for Robert. Not because I cared. Because rituals matter, even when they're endings. Inside, a turkey sandwich.
Plain.
White bread.
Mayo.
Pre-sliced deli turkey from the grocery store.
No irlom tomatos. No herbaioli.
No hand-baked bread. Just the kind of thing you make when you've stopped trying. The note said, "Good luck today." Nothing else. He didn't notice. Stop for a second. I need you to answer something. By month 8, I'd personally cleared $310,000. $310,000. I had it hidden in a bank account Robert didn't know existed. If you had $300,000 in a secret bank account, would you leave him now or wait for the big reveal? Vote wait or go in the comments. December 3rd, 9:47 a.m. I stood outside Vance Capital, staring up at the building. 42 floors of glass and steel. My reflection stared back at me. Charcoal suit, hair pulled back, the kind of quiet confidence I'd spent 3 years forgetting I had. I could still leave. I could go home, pretend none of this ever happened, and stay invisible forever. But my feet moved forward. The receptionist was a man in his 20s. Kind eyes. He smiled when I approached. I gave my name.
Elena Rousseau.
Said I was expected. He checked his computer. Said Mr. Vance mentioned I'd be joining the meeting. Conference room A. He'd take me up. The elevator ride lasted 42 seconds. I counted every one. My heart was thunder. My skin felt electric. Every nerve ending alive and humming with anticipation. Conference room A had floor-to-ceiling windows. You could see the entire city from up here. The East River. Brooklyn. The bridges. Robert was already there. Sitting at a table that could seat 20, flanked by 2 Hartwell partners. Brad, and someone I didn't recognize. Robert saw me first. His face drained of color. Asked what I was doing here. I didn't answer. The door opened behind me. Julian Vance walked in. I'd never seen him in person before. Never even looked him up. But I knew it was him immediately. Mid-50s.
Silver hair. Perfectly tailored navy suit. The kind of face that didn't need to perform power. It just had it. He looked at me first. Not at Robert. At me. Said my name.
Elena.
Extended his hand. Said it was good to finally meet me in person. His handshake was warm.
Steady.
And when our eyes met, there was a flicker of recognition. Of shared understanding. Of all the notes we'd written. All the meals I'd made. All the ways we'd seen each other across distance and silence. My pulse was a wild, untamed thing. The thrumming in my veins was so intense I wondered if he could feel it through my hand. I felt Robert's eyes burning into me. Julian turned to the table. Thanked them for coming. Robert stood, stumbling slightly. Said it was an honor. Then looked at me again, completely lost. Said he didn't realize his wife would be joining. Julian sat at the head of the table. Gestured for me to sit beside him. Said I wasn't here as Robert's wife. Silence. Robert's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Julian continued, calm and measured. Said I was here as his business partner. Brad leaned forward, confused.
Asked about that.
Julian nodded. Explained that he and I had been collaborating for the past 11 months. That I ran a ghost kitchen operation called Ember Salt. That in that time, I'd built it into a 7-figure business with over 91% customer retention and a 400-person waitlist. Brad's eyes went wide.
Said he ordered from there twice a week.
Julian smiled slightly.
Said a lot of people did.
Robert was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Asked if I'd been running a business. I said yes. For a year? 11 months. His voice cracked. Asked why I didn't tell him. I met his eyes.
Calm.
Steady. Unflinching. Said he threw my lunches in the trash for 3 years and didn't tell me. So, I guessed we were even. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The faint sound of traffic 42 floors below. Robert's hands were shaking. He started to say my name. Julian cut him off. Said he'd reviewed Hartwell's financials. Slid a folder across the table. Said the firm was over-leveraged, poorly diversified, and client retention had dropped 22% year over year. Robert opened the folder with trembling hands. Julian said he wasn't interested in investing $15 million to prop up a sinking ship. Brad looked like he'd been punched. Julian continued. Said he was interested in acquiring their top-performing client list and hiring 3 of their senior analysts directly. He'd offer $4 million for the assets. Hartwell could restructure or dissolve. That wasn't his concern. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. Said Julian was gutting the firm. Julian said he was buying the only parts worth saving. Robert turned to me. His eyes were red, desperate. Said I'd planned this. I said no quietly. Said I didn't plan this to hurt him. I just got tired of disappearing. Robert said I couldn't be okay with this. Used my name like a plea. Like if he said it enough times, I'd remember I was supposed to be loyal to him. I thought about every morning, every lunchbox, every note I wrote hoping he'd see me, every single time he didn't. I thought about him telling me to cover up.
To stop embarrassing him.
To stop trying to be something I'm not. I thought about the studio apartment in Chelsea. About Vanessa Cole. About the secret bank account with almost $300,000 he'd hidden from me while I counted pennies for groceries. I said I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this because I finally remembered I'm worth more than being invisible.
He stood.
Didn't sign anything.
Didn't say anything.
Just walked out. Brad followed, muttering apologies.
The door closed.
The room was silent. Julian looked at me. Asked if I was all right. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Said that was harder than I thought it would be. He said revenge usually is. I looked out at the city. 42 floors up. Everything looked smaller from here. Said I didn't think I wanted revenge. I thought I just wanted him to see me. He asked if Robert did. I thought about Robert's face. The shock. The betrayal. The moment he realized his invisible wife had built an empire while he was building a lie.
Said I didn't know.
Maybe. Julian asked if it mattered. I smiled.
Small. Honest.
said no.
I didn't think it did. We sat there for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space. Finally, I asked the question I'd been holding since week 2. Why did he help me? Julian leaned back in his chair, asked if I wanted the business answer or the real one. I said the real one.
He thought for a moment.
Said because my food tasted like someone gave a damn. And he'd forgotten what that felt like. He paused. Said after his divorce, he spent 2 years eating at expensive restaurants, trying to fill a space that had nothing to do with hunger. And then one day, he opened a lunchbox that wasn't meant for him. And for the first time in years, he tasted care. His voice was quiet. He didn't help me because he was a good person. He helped me because I reminded him that care still exists. And he didn't want the world to lose that.
I didn't know what to say.
So I just said thank you. He smiled. Told me not to thank him. Said I did this. He just gave me a place to start. I moved out the following week. No drama. No fight. Robert didn't try to stop me. I took my knives, my lunchbox, 3 suitcases of clothes, left the $19,000 sofa, left the art we never liked, left the wedding album I hadn't opened in 2 years. I rented a 1-bedroom in Astoria, $2,400 a month, small kitchen, east-facing windows. It felt like a palace. Robert signed the divorce papers in June.
No contest. No alimony.
He moved to Charlotte for a new job. Some mid-tier wealth management firm that didn't know his history. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel sad either. Mostly, I just felt done. By the end of year 2, Ember Salt had 3 commissary locations. Annual revenue, $3.2 million. We employed 16 people. I hired Maya. She'd been working at a hotel in Newark, hating every second. She cried when I called her. Said she thought I'd forgotten about her. I said never. That this was always supposed to be ours. We got written up in Bon Appetit. Then the New York Times. Then Eater. People started asking for interviews asking about my secret. I never knew how to answer. Just said I made food the way I always did. Like it matters. Julian and I still exchange notes. Not as often. Maybe once a month.
They're shorter now.
Less about business. More about life. His last one asked if I was happy. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I wrote back. Said I didn't know yet. But I wasn't pretending anymore. And that felt close. We've met in person 4 times since the boardroom. Once for a contract signing. Once at a food expo. Once for coffee near Bryant Park. Unplanned, 2 hours, the kind of conversation that felt like breathing. And once, 6 months ago, at a small restaurant in the West Village. He ordered the special. I ordered wine. We didn't talk about Robert. Or Vance Capital. Or Ember Salt. We just talked. About loneliness. About what it means to be seen. About the difference between being alone and being lonely. At the end of the night, he walked me to the subway.
Thanked me.
I asked for what? He said for reminding him that care still exists. I smiled. Said he'd already said that. He said he knew. But he didn't think he could say it enough. I don't know what we are.
Friends. Partners.
Something more. Something less. It doesn't feel like it needs a label. People ask me if I'm happy now. I tell them I don't know yet. But I'm not invisible. I'm not small. I'm not pretending. And I'm not waiting for someone else to see me anymore. I still cook every day. Not for Robert. Not for Julian. For the people who take the time to taste it. And for myself. Ember Salt is still growing. We just signed a deal to partner with a meal kit company. We're launching a line of sauces and spice blends. Maya and I are talking about opening a small retail location. Not a full restaurant. Just a counter. A place where people can pick up food that feels like it was made by someone who gives a damn. Because it was. I got a note from Julian last week. It said he was proud of me. I wrote back saying I was proud of me too. I don't know if this is a love story. I don't think it is. I think it's a story about what happens when you stop waiting for permission to exist. When you stop shrinking. When you stop believing that being invisible is the same as being loved. Robert texted me last month. Just once. Said he was sorry. I didn't respond. Not because I'm angry. Because there's nothing left to say. I still have that first note Julian sent me. The one about tasting care and not stopping. It's folded in my wallet. Crease soft from being opened and closed 1,000 times. Sometimes when I'm tired, I take it out and read it. And I remember. I was never the problem. I was just with the wrong person. This is a revenge cafe story. If you've ever felt invisible, this one's for you. So, was it a fairy tale or a trap? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever been in Elena's position or Robert's, I want to hear your story. Because we've all been invisible at some point. The question is, what did you do about it? I'm reading every comment. See you in the next story.